A good day, my friends. We are gathered here today to reflect on responsible parents as the new heroes of the pandemic. And in many ways, we can reflect on two key documents of the church today about parents and the family. We can reflect on Amoris Laetitia as a pastoral approach to Humanae Vitae. The background of this is Humanae Vitae was the encyclical of Pope Paul VI that came out in July of 1968 on the regulation of births. It brought about some controversy, but I think after more than 50 years now, the apostolic exhortation or post-synodal exhortation of the Holy Father, Amoris Laetitia, came out 2 years ago, would try to balance off and see how we can bring out a pastoral approach to Humanae Vitae. So this year we are also asked to observe Amoris Laetitia Family Year, starting in March of this year up to June of the following year. So let us then discuss the contents of Amoris Laetitia. Happily, in the section 222, we have there the four core values of natural family planning that we in our network have also been promoting here in the Philippines. And these are that we are for pro-life, we are for responsible parenthood, we are for natural family planning, and we are for the formation of conscience. This graph tells us how we are trying to do that. The first principle or core value is we are pro-life. That is non-negotiable. But secondly, our goal is for responsible parenthood, not population control, and responsible parenthood in terms of procreation of children and the education of children. Our third dimension is our means to adopt is natural family planning. And here we have the 6 modern scientific methods of family planning, starting with basal body temperature, Billings ovulation method, the symptothermal method, the lactational amenorrhea method, the standard days method, and the 2-day method. And our fourth pastoral guideline or core value is that we would like to help couples make an informed and morally responsible choice. So these are the 4 pastoral guidelines we follow in our own ministry. Going back, the first principle then is we are pro-life. And here, Apostolic Amoris Laetitia tells us the pastoral care of newly married couples must always involve encouraging them to be generous in bestowing life. Human life, according to Humanae Vitae, is sacred. Our predecessor, Pope John the 23rd, recalled, since from its beginnings, it calls for the creative action of God. Amoris Laetitia considers that if the family is the sanctuary of life, the place where life is conceived and cared for, it is a horrendous contradiction when it becomes a place where life is rejected and destroyed. We say no to abortion. Amoris Laetitia is emphatic on this. So great is the value of a human life, and so inalienable the right to life of an innocent child growing in the mother's womb, that no alleged right to one's own body can justify a decision to terminate that life, which is an end in itself and which can never be considered the property of another human being. Last October, there was a consensus among many countries called the Geneva Consensus Declaration, and it reaffirms the dignity and worth of every human person. In no case, it states, should abortion be proposed as a method of family planning, and there is no international right to abortion. Unfortunately, only last month or so, the European Parliament came out with a statement that promoting abortion as a human right. Our second pastoral guideline is we are for responsible parenthood. Again, Humanae Vitae gives us already the definition: attending to relevant physical, economic, psychological, and social conditions, couples exercise responsible parenthood who prudently and generously decide to have a large family, or who, for serious reasons and with due respect to the moral law, choose to have no more children for the time being or even for an indeterminate period. Amoris Laetitia also points out the need for the formation of conscience. Decisions involving responsible parenthood presupposes the formation of conscience, which is the most secret core and sanctuary of a person. Therefore, each one is alone with God, whose voice echoes in the depths of the heart. This is a statement from Gaudium et Spes of the Second Vatican Council. Again, continuing with Vatican II, Amoris Laetitia states, the couple will make decisions by common counsel and effort. Let them thoughtfully take into account both their own welfare and that of their children, those already born and those which the future may bring. Continuing, for this accounting, they need to reckon with both the material and spiritual conditions of the times, as well as their state in life. Finally, they should consult the interests of the family group, of temporal society, and of the church herself. The parents themselves and no one else should ultimately make this judgment in the sight of God. So it is not the church nor the government that tells couples what they should judge. It is the couples themselves ultimately that should make this judgment in the sight of God. Procreation instead of reproductive health is also pointed out by Amoris Laetitia. The Creator made man and woman share in the work of his creation. And that is what we mean by the term procreation. And at the same time made them instruments of his love, entrusting to them the responsibility for the future of mankind through the transmission of human life. Responsible personal discernment is called for. If we consider the immense variety of concrete situations, what is possible is simply a renewed encouragement to undertake a responsible, personal, and pastoral discernment of particular cases, one which would recognize that since the degree of responsibility is not equal in all cases, the consequences or effects of a rule need not necessarily always be the same. A third pastoral guideline we are following is we are for natural family planning. Following up on the first two principles that we are pro-life and we are for responsible parenthood, now we talk about the means for attaining this goal, natural family planning. Amoris Laetitia briefly states, in accord with the personal and fully human character of conjugal love, family planning fittingly takes place as the result of a consensual dialogue between the spouses, respect for times and consideration of the dignity of the partner. In this sense, the teaching of the encyclical Humanae Vitae and the apostolic exhortation of John Paul II, Familiaris Consortio, ought to be taken up anew in order to counter a mentality that is often hostile to life. The use of natural methods for Amoris Laetitia, the use of methods based on the laws of nature and the incidence of fertility, as already mentioned in Humanae Vitae, are to be promoted, since these methods respect the bodies of the spouses, encourage tenderness between them, and favor the education of an authentic freedom. This is taken from the Catechism of the Catholic Church. Let me describe for a moment our program of RPANFP in the Archdiocese of Cagayan de Oro. Since 2006, we have been teaching the 6 modern NFP methods, BBT, BOM, STM, LAM, SDM, and TDM. And we have already reached out to 28,000 couple acceptors. 40% of these have adopted actually standard days method, which is simpler and easier to follow. We also promote natural family planning with the city government of Cagayan de Oro and several municipalities in the province. And this is with critical collaboration with the LGUs. In our network, broader network, we have included now several dioceses, the Catholic Women's League, Assisi Development Foundation, also Caritas Manila is part of that, and several other civil society groups. We have given NFP trainings to participants coming from 81 archdioceses and dioceses. And we have conducted trainers training in 45 dioceses, where they have actually asked us to go to their diocese. And we have also interacted with Population Commission and the Department of Health regarding the inclusion of natural family planning in the government's own family planning program. This is maybe a map showing the outreach of our network. We have given trainings to representatives from 81 dioceses, and out of the 81 dioceses, 45 have actually asked for trainings in their own areas. So they have actually shown interest in our program of all NFP. Contraception in line with Humanae Vitae, and this is described in Amoris Laetitia. From the outset, love refuses every impulse to close in on itself. It is open to a fruitfulness that draws it beyond itself. Hence, no genital act or of husband and wife can refuse this meaning, even when for various reasons, it may not always in fact beget a new life. The gift of children is also extolled in Amoris Laetitia. Children are a wonderful gift from God and a joy for parents and the church. Through them, the Lord renews the world. We go on to our fourth pastoral guideline, and this is perhaps better explained, especially in Amoris Laetitia. We are for enabling couples to make an informed and morally responsible choice according to the dictates of a right conscience or an enlightened conscience. First, we talk about conscience itself. Naturally, every effort should be made to encourage the development of an enlightened conscience. Yet conscience can also recognize with sincerity and honesty what for now is the most generous response which can be given to God, and come to see with a certain moral security that it is what God Himself is asking amid the concrete complexity of one's limits, while yet not fully the objective ideal. So for St. Thomas Aquinas, it is true that general rules set forth a good which can never be disregarded or neglected, but in their formulation, they cannot provide absolutely for all particular situations. This is also echoed by the International Theological Commission. Natural law could not be presented as an already established set of rules that impose themselves a priori on the moral subject. Rather, it is a source of objective inspiration for the deeply personal process of making decisions. Amoris Laetitia points out mitigating factors. The Catechism of the Catholic Church clearly mentions these factors. Immutability and responsibility for an action can be diminished or even nullified by ignorance, inadvertence, duress, fear, habit, inordinate attachments, and other psychological or social factors. Again, the Church possesses a solid body of reflection concerning mitigating factors and situations. Hence, it can no longer simply be said that all those in any irregular situation are living in a state of mortal sin and are deprived of sanctifying grace. We should keep in mind that there are certain norms for a sinful act. First, we have to examine the object or act itself. What is the intention or motivation? Is there full knowledge and consent? And what are the circumstances? Certainly, poverty, for instance, is one circumstance that can also be taken into account. So these are norms for a sinful act. No one accidentally falls into a grave sin. It has always to be with full knowledge and consent. So our role, according to Amoris Laetitia, is to form consciences. We find it hard to make a room for the consciences of the faithful, who very often respond as best they can to the gospel amid their limitations, and are capable of carrying out their own discernment in complex situations. We have been called to form consciences, not to replace them. In our own program, we tell people we are there to form consciences, not to force consciences. So perhaps we can talk a bit now about why we are engaged in critical engagement with government. First, in our All NFP program, we want to include all modern NFP methods. We want to reach out to all parishes, barangays, and families. We want to promote natural family planning all the way without combining with contraceptives. And we want to engage all family-oriented organizations, especially government, which has the resources also to promote natural family planning. So these are the four meanings of why we include all NFP in our program. Our objectives in the network is to use available public funds for the promotion of NFP to reach out to many more couples, to press government agencies themselves to include NFP in its family planning program as mandated by the law, and to strengthen the government's program for NFP, for example, by training government workers and sharing our manuals on NFP. From our experience, we find many government personnel are actually interested to know more about NFP and also to promote it in their own tasking. So these are the moral perspectives of why we are in critical engagement with government. First, it is only material, not formal cooperation. We use public funds solely for NFP, not formally for contraceptives. We are in indirect, not direct cooperation. Our involvement in contraceptive promotion is not direct. Our intention is to provide an alternative precisely to artificial methods. And we are also engaged in remote, not proximate cooperation. Our NFP promotion is done separately from the government's program for contraceptives. So we go now to conclude in examining what are the key aspects in the pastoral approach of Amoris Laetitia that can also be included in Humanae Vitae in its approach. First, gradualness, the law of gradualness as proposed by St. John Paul II. This is not a gradualness of law, but rather a gradualness in the prudential exercise of free acts on the part of subjects who are not in a position to understand, appreciate, or fully carry out the objective demands of the law. Another dimension in the pastoral approach is the call for discernment. There are two ways of thinking which recurs throughout the Church's history, according to Pope Francis: casting off and reinstating. The Church's way from the time of the Council of Jerusalem has always been the way of Jesus, the way of mercy and reinstatement. The way of the Church is not to condemn anyone forever. The Synod Fathers also add on discernment. A negative judgment about an objective situation does not imply a judgment about the imputability or culpability of the person involved. Integration is another dimension in our pastoral approach. Regarding couples in irregular situations, the logic of integration is the key to their pastoral care, which would allow them not only to realize that they belong to the church as the body of Christ, but also to know that they can have a joyful and fruitful experience in it. Accompaniment, again, is part of the pastoral approach of Amoris Laetitia. What we are speaking of, is a process of accompaniment and discernment, which guides the faithful to an awareness of their situation before God. And the church must accompany with attention and care the weakest of her children who show signs of a wounded and troubled love by restoring in them hope and confidence. So pastoral mercy, a pastor cannot feel that it is enough simply to apply moral laws to those living in irregular situations, as if they were stones to throw at people's lives. This would bespeak the close heart of one used to hiding behind the church's teachings. Compassion for sinners is precisely what Humanae Vitae also has been asking for. When our Lord came not to judge, but to save the world, was he not bitterly severe towards sin, but patient and abounding in mercy towards sinners? So the primacy of mercy, we should keep in mind. Mercy is the very foundation of the church's life. Mercy is the fullness of justice and the most radiant manifestation of God's truth. We are called to show mercy because mercy was first shown to us. And this then is the final call of Amoris Laetitia, pastoral discernment with hope. Amoris Laetitia offers us a framework and a setting which help us avoid a cold bureaucratic morality. Instead, it sets us in the context of a pastoral discernment filled with merciful love, which is ever ready to understand, forgive, accompany, hope, and above all, integrate. This then, I think, is also the pastoral approach of Amoris Laetitia that we can summarize again. The idea of gradualness in our approach to the law, discernment, the need for integration, the need for accompaniment, also showing pastoral mercy, and above all, giving hope to those in irregular situations. We hope and pray that the presence of the message of Amoris Laetitia as a pastoral approach to Humanae Vitae may also be with our responsible parents, especially during this time of the pandemic. Thank you for your attention.